Marshall Manning is going to take a hard look at Tennessee. Give me some background. He's going into what year in high school?
Marshall Manning is going into 9th grade.
Okay. All right. So let's chill out for a second. The odds are Josh Heupel's not the head coach at the University of Tennessee when Marshall Manning makes his decision. Just odds. If you look across the board in college football, you usually last 5-8 years if you have some success. Maybe Josh Heupel will be here 30 years. I don't know. I think that would be great for Tennessee, and the stability would be fantastic, and it would show that he had success. But Caleb, you don't know if Marshall Manning is committing to Josh Heupel, his offensive system. You don't know what he's committing to, but I feel certain that Tennessee gets a really strong look here.
Oh, I agree. Now, for those who don't know Marshall Manning, Peyton Manning basically stayed in Denver, so Marshall Manning is going to high school in Inglewood, Colorado, which could
Long Beach, Inglewood.
not that Inglewood. That Inglewood starts with an I. This Inglewood starts with an E. So
I drove through the other Inglewood.
So there's going to be questions about his level of competition, but I don't think that's going to be fair because if, for those who don't know, yes, the Mannings played in Louisiana. Newman High School had no real competition though either. That was a much lower level of high school football in Louisiana at that time. At that time,
did they play the? Did they have a private school circuit? That's the question I would have.
Well, that's what I'm not back then. Private school circuits didn't become a thing until Arch Manning was there, and so he was a lot more. But there, so back in the early 90s, particularly in the New Orleans area, and I know this because of the Memphis area too, was the same way. The private school circuit was not the pipeline was not that deep. That became a thing in the late 90s, early 2000s, particularly I think when the voucher programs got bigger. But in the early 90s when the Mannings were coming out, like, no, the best athletes were the public school kids. But now it's a lot different. But highlight reel has come out of Arch Manning, and this is him in middle school. And Dave, I know it's just middle school, but homeboy's got an arm. Homeboy's got an arm.
Are you showing me video of him? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, there's video of him already. And I'm not Marshall Manning. Yeah, Marshall Manning has an arm. This is Marshall Manning. Highlight reel of him right now. So, get in there. I mean, a quick pass over the middle like that doesn't seem like much, but quite honestly, when you're in middle school and you can make some of these throws, that's pretty impressive, actually. So
yeah, I mean, that's pretty advanced. If I watched him, I would think that he was, if I walked on a camp, saw him, I would say he's looks about like a junior.
And here we go. Yep. And kind of a fade right there. Those are tough throws to make for a middle school kid.
Okay. Do you want that pressure if you're Marshall Manning of following in your dad's footsteps? Now, probably a little bit easier, to be honest with you, that Peyton left in 97 and didn't win a national championship in 98. Because that would be incredibly difficult to live up to. As a matter of fact, I would probably say this is just a bad idea. You going to Tennessee if I were one of his confidants. But could he win an SEC title like his dad did? Certainly he could, and potentially top it. That to me is what makes it appealing if I'm him.
Yes, I agree. And here's a couple of things people need to know. No Manning has won a national title as a quarterback yet in college. I mean, Eli didn't at Ole Miss. Archie didn't at Ole Miss. We could see if Arch is going to do it at Texas. Peyton didn't at Tennessee. But you got 4 Super Bowls between Peyton and Eli. Here's what's interesting about this. It depends on the makeup. Because, look, Eli Manning had no problem following in his father's footsteps at Ole Miss, right? None. Now, I will say this. I bet my guess is for Eli Manning, there was more pressure because of Peyton than his father, right? Because of what Peyton had just done in college. You were covering recruiting during that time. Wouldn't you say that there was more pressure because of Peyton than there was because of Archie?
Yep.
But Eli also, I've never seen a guy be like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to be playing football. I mean, that's the way he approached football. Like his whole life, it felt like it. Look, I guess this is what I do. Is Marshall Manning like that? Or does Marshall Manning have Peyton's moxie? You know what I mean? That's going to be the real question. Because
now, I think you're selling Eli short on moxie. Just because Peyton was an elite leader, I mean, there were 2 seasons in which the Giants barely slipped into the playoffs, and I thought that his steadiness throughout the season got them there, and they turned it on at the right time. That's He
his
deserves some credit
steadiness
for
is
that.
what kept their composure. That's what I mean. The football savant thing can help in those situations. You're right, because he's so calm, he kind of oozes calmness to the rest of the team. He's not but he was never the Peyton Manning, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. I'm talking about the guys that like they grabbed their teammates by the throat and was like, "You better come with me on this. We're doing this together." You know what I mean? I guarantee Eli was probably the guy that was like, all right, you don't want to do 2 days in the summer? That's fine. Go do your own thing. I'll work it. I'll do it with whoever else is here. Peyton was probably like, I need every receiver here with me doing 2 days in the summer so we can get better at this.
Oh, but I bet Eli filed it away in the back of his brain.
Maybe he did, and that's how he became such good teammates with guys like Victor Cruz, who probably did do the 2 days with him.
This guy took 50 snaps with a 1 today. That guy over there who just got his new contract took 10 snaps.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I'm going to file that away. Now, Peyton is probably the one that screams at the guy who takes 10 in front of everybody else. Eli's probably the one that just remembers it.
Right. Exactly. I guess that's where Peyton is, but that's where I say Peyton is more like he kind of carries himself the way Michael Jordan carried himself on the Bulls, doesn't he? Or the way Kobe did with the Lakers. Whereas they cussed you out and got in your face and just demanded you, and they dressed you down in front of everybody to try to pull you along. And I think the question is Marshall like that, or is he more like Eli? Because the reason I bring up that personality, the Eli personality, it better allows you to handle pressure of following in someone's footsteps, doesn't it? Because you don't put so much on yourself all the time.
Okay, let me ask you this question. And it came up on the message board. Bank on it, brought to you by Commercial Bank, member FDIC, life made better.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial Bank, life made better.
Okay. If Marshall Manning and his pet Chihuahua deputy decided not to go to Tennessee, what school would be the most painful for the Vols? General Ursa says, as long as Marshall doesn't go to Alabama, UGA, or UF, I'm fine with him not coming to Tennessee. I think the Texas thing worked out pretty well for Ole Miss and Tennessee. I mean, Texas made sense, and you got the feeling that the Manning family and the Kiffin family are two different, or Blaine in particular, are two different types of people. Really, the tie was just a nephew to Tennessee, and it probably wasn't the style of offense they wanted. So that made sense. But what happens to Tennessee's fan base if Marshall Manning goes to Alabama, Florida, or Georgia?
It's going to be a very tough thing to accept. Alabama, just because of the history there, but Florida because of what Florida. I mean, the whole rivalry exploded because Peyton Manning couldn't beat Florida in the 90s. And another level to this that we're not thinking about is what we're talking about right now with if Marshall Manning chose Alabama, Florida, or Georgia. You do realize that's how Ole Miss felt when Peyton Manning chose Tennessee. For those who don't know, before 1990.
Yeah, and okay. I was going to say Tennessee wasn't a rival, but they sort of were. You had the Mule game and you had the Archie Who game. So
from 1956 until the divisional split in 92, right. Tennessee and Ole Miss played every year. And while Tennessee didn't care as much about Ole Miss hated Tennessee, hated them with a passion, and they took it very personal. And so for when Peyton Manning chose Tennessee, yes, it wasn't choosing Mississippi State, who Ole Miss also hates the most, but it wasn't like he was choosing. It wouldn't have been the same if he had chosen Florida, who Ole Miss doesn't care about as much. And that's a good point.
I agree with General Ursus. If Lane wasn't at Ole Miss, Arch probably would have been a Rebel. If they had somebody competent there, he probably would have been. And I'm not saying, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. Lane Kiffin is very confident. He's also very brash. That turns some people off, especially a family like the Mannings. If they had somebody that wasn't brash and competent like Lane, I don't want to get misquoted, okay? Lane is competent. But if they had somebody that wasn't brash and competent like Lane, yeah, I think Arch goes to Oxford.
I think so too. I think so too, probably. Yeah, you're probably right. I think that, but at the same time, you know, he also he took a risk going to play for Steve Sarkisian. That was about developing for the NFL because I mean, it ain't like Sark. You know, I know I'm not saying Sark's brash, but he's got some demons that you're putting something. You're risking a little bit going to play for Steve Sarkisian if you're a Manning.